I would love to say that I have this all together, but we have experienced ebbs and flows through this whole process for the last 20 years.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time poor parent who just wants answers now.
I am so looking forward to this conversation because I'm so hungry.
Hungry.
And I'm just curious, what's for dinner tonight?
This is the bane of every mother's life, I swear, because it doesn't matter whether or not you actually find a solution tonight, you've still got to deal with it tomorrow.
So what's for dinner, Mum, is the title of the podcast. And I genuinely want to know now, like I'm really excited. As soon as I start thinking about it, you know why I think it's such a big deal? Oh, by the way, my name's Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm the author of 6 books about raising happy families. I'm here with my wife and co-host, Kylie, Mrs. Happy Families, mum to our 6 daughters.
And chef of the family.
Well, I used to love to get into the kitchen and show off. And then I discovered that I had no idea what I was doing, and you were just so good. And over the years, it's very much fallen to you to the point where now if there's a barbecue, I'm all over that, and I do the roasts. And I've got a couple of signature dishes that I can pull out in an emergency, but really the day-to-day drama of dealing with kids saying, "Mum, what's for dinner? What's for dinner, Mum?" It falls to you. You look tired. I just said it. You're like, oh, don't even ask. Do we have to have this conversation?
So yesterday afternoon, I rang you in a fluster because the shopping centre that I usually shop at, the grocery store, was closed.
Audi's being renovated.
Yeah. And so I ended up at another shopping centre, another grocery store, trying to do the groceries in an unfamiliar setting and just feeling overwhelmed, overloaded.
And you didn't have time to do the groceries. You're doing the groceries because there was no food in the fridge and everyone was saying, what's for dinner? And you're like, I don't have any food. I don't know.
That's exactly right. So it was really, really stressful.
So we asked a bunch of mums what their response is when they hear those gorgeous words. What's for dinner, Mum?
I'm the slave in the kitchen again, and all I get is what's for dinner? How about helping?
Well, I try to be fairly organised, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to get eaten. So we kind of go with what's already prepared and then probably some backups.
So normally I'm the expert, but this is all on you, Mrs. Happy Families, because when the kids say what's for dinner, Mum, well, they don't say that to me. They say it to you. But when they ask me what's for dinner, I just say, go ask Mum.
Yes, you do.
I don't know. If I'm looking after it, which takeaway shop would you like us to visit?
And that's very much the case in our house, isn't it? If Dad's taking care of dinner, where are we going?
I do a good job when I do the takeout.
You do a great job.
I get the kids in the car. Or actually, I usually go solo so I can listen to a podcast. But I always come back with...
You come back with the goods.
Yeah, I feel like I've gone out and hunted and gathered and done what I needed to do. I mean, I really love going down to the butcher and buying some... I know that not everybody... some people will be vegan or vegetarian and that's great. I kind of wish that I was there, but I'm not. And I love going to the butcher and coming back with a big bag of meat and thinking this is what we're having on the barbie tonight, but that's not the normal. So what do you do, Mrs. Happy Families? We need some help because I reckon we can really make life better for a lot of parents if you can help us to know how to answer this question, what's for dinner, Mum?
I would love to say that I have this all together, but we have experienced ebbs and flows through this whole process for the last 20 years.
This is an unfair thing for me to say, but I actually know what the solution is. I can't do the cooking. I'm lousy in the kitchen compared to you. I struggle to understand the difference between a pot and a saucepan and a fry pan. Like I don't know. Did I say the same thing? I'm a little bit lost. But I know the secret to family happiness in our home is having that dinner around about 5:30. I also know that having a meal list, knowing what we're going to eat, that is 99% of the battle.
100%. You are correct.
But we just, even though we know it, we don't put the list together.
We don't. No, well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we actually do. We do a great job of it.
Yeah.
And other times we actually put the list together. But when we look at the list as we go through the week, we don't actually want to eat anything that's on the list. So it doesn't help us sometimes.
Or you open the fridge and it's like, oh, well, we're supposed to be having that tonight, but we don't have the ingredients. So we end up having something that we're not supposed to eat. Well,
in our case tonight, we've got all these potatoes. I've got to use potatoes. So that has dictated what we're eating.
Yeah, it has. So what would you say would be the most helpful couple of bits and pieces of advice that you would give to any mum who's tearing her hair out, even listening to this. You know, the stress levels are going up just hearing us talk about what's for dinner, Mum. Oh, actually, before you do, I've got to share the funniest story. We were having dinner. It was only in the last few weeks. And it was a beautiful meal. Like we sat down. Oh, it was so good eating this food. And I distinctly remember one of our kids actually looked at you with a mouthful of food. We're having our evening dinner meal. And she looks at you with a mouthful of food and says, "What are we having for dinner tomorrow night, Mum?"
Well, I know that you say love is spelt Time for a kid, but in our house, there's a few of them. I swear love is spelt FOOD.
Yeah, I reckon it is. But I was thinking about it just as I was saying that. And I think they're actually asking the question because they might be a little bit hungry, but really, when you know what's for dinner, you feel two things. Number one, you feel reassurance, like, okay, there is going to be food. I'm not going to starve. I'm going to be okay. But number two, when you find out what it is, you start to get excited. It gives you something to look forward to. Like definitely in our home, at least, there's so much enthusiasm about what's coming up for dinner. Like we get so excited about it. I was having a chat with Jess Rowe in the podcast before you started joining me about 6 or 8 weeks ago. And Jessica Rowe is known on Instagram as the crap housewife. And every night she takes a photo of just these very, very, very ordinary meals, you know, sausages and mash. And she's done the sausages in the fry pan, and not that there's anything the matter with sausage and mash, but it's not exactly gourmet cooking. And you'd kind of expect the superstar Jessica Rowe to have the fancy meals and things. And she's kind of saying it's okay to own it. You don't have to be a great cook, but there is something awesome about just knowing we've got this meal coming up. You can say to the kids, "Oh, we're going to go and buy some chips and just have chip sandwiches," and they'll be like, "Oh, that's so awesome." They'll be excited. There's something to look forward to, something to savor and anticipate about dinner, just so long as you know that it's coming, right?
I like the idea of savouring, and I think that you've really tapped into something there. I think our kids do when they know their favourites being cooked. There's just that. So the salivating starts, you know, as soon as they walk in the door and go, "What? We're having chicken broccoli for dinner."
So let's work out, because we've been promising and promising, you've got these happy families strategies to help the time poor parent who just wants answers now. We'll do that in a sec.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
For a happier family, try a Happy Families membership, because a happy family doesn't just happen. Details at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time poor parent who just wants answers now. And today we are talking about a topic that I think every mum just is pulling her hair out wanting answers to.
And some dads, let's face it, there's plenty of there's some dads who look after this. I asked a bunch of parents what their number one strategy for dealing with this challenge of what's for dinner, Mum, is.
I think about what my mum used to say to me, and she would say to me and my siblings, "Chicken surprise." So I say, "Chicken surprise." "Hi, how are you? So nice to see you. I'll let you know when I figure it out."
So, Mrs. Happy Families, if you were to give us a list of your top 3 or your top 5 tips, what would they be?
Oh, I have a list that's so long. It's crazy. Preparation. Preparation is 100% number one key.
So do you mean like list preparation, so know what you're having, or do you mean prepare the food ahead of time?
Both.
Because we're all that magically organised. Yeah. Okay.
But a couple of things that have worked really, really well for our house over the years. You've already kind of tapped into that, you know, creating a menu, maybe a 1 or 2 week menu that you can just rotate throughout, especially when you've got younger children and they're fussy. They're fussy and they like specific foods. It can be really daunting to introduce new flavours and new foods to them. So having, 14 meals that your family just loves eating.
And they're on rotation.
And they're just on rotation. That can be really helpful for people who just, are on autopilot and don't want to have to think, but they know today's chicken night and we're having X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago we had this setup where it was, Monday night was Italian and Tuesday night was Asian and Wednesday night was, I don't know, barbecue or whatever it was, but we kind of, Thursday night was wraps or it was Mexican. And we
had fish night.
We had fish night, yeah. And that meant that we had some really nice variety with our meals, but we kind of had a theme for every night of the week. And I know that might sound too much for some people, but for us it made it really easy because Italian meant that we were going to have lasagna or spaghetti bolognese or pizza. Right. And fish night meant that we were going to have some salmon on a fancy night, or maybe we just have some fish parcels or fish fingers even on a cheap night. But it kind of just gave you that direction. All right, what's next?
So one year I actually brought a cookbook.
Oh, The Sally book?
The Sally book.
So Sally Fitz somebody. She's a surfer, Fitzgibbon surfer. And this book has become my heaven. I love this book.
We tap into her book a lot because she what she did that just revolutionized my world was she put a menu together for 4 weeks, breakfast, lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
And not only did she do that, she then created a shopping list for me.
Perfect.
I didn't have to think about a thing.
Yeah.
So the only thing I had to do was because the meals were for 2 people. Well, obviously we have a few more than 2 in our house. I had to kind of just change the quantities, but it made it so easy for me. I didn't have to think about anything. The downside to it, there was some downsides. It took a little bit longer because I was making new foods for breakfast, lunch and tea.
Yeah.
We were
In fact,
eating.
I remember you complaining and saying my whole life is meal preparation at the moment because new meals take time to get your head around. So advice on that would be don't actually take on too many new meals in any compressed period of time. Take on a new meal and get used to it before you start adding new ones.
So that was a little bit tricky to navigate. We also had the issue that we were introducing lots of new foods to the family, including myself, who's not a particularly adventurous eater. And so we had some nights where we kind of were cooking meals and there was a few children who were very disgruntled because they didn't enjoy what we were eating. And then I guess just because we were eating lots of new foods, I had to buy a lot of the staples that were part of her staple food.
But not part of our usual staples.
That's right. So we found that it was a little bit expensive. But I loved the concept.
Well, I was going to say, rather than getting caught up on the Sally Fitzgibbon book, which we just loved, and no, it's not a sponsored podcast, the process is what matters here, not the actual book. And the process was there's a list of meals for breakfast, lunch and tea, and there's also a shopping list so that you can absolutely dial this in. I mean, we found that it was not practical. It was just too expensive. Some of the meals in there were kind of pricey and we were having foods that were out of season and so it cost even more.
But we actually had a friend who did this of her own accord. She actually created 4 shopping lists in the Coles online shopping app.
Yeah.
And she would just say, okay, it's week 1 and this is my shopping list week 1, and she would just order that and that would be her meal list for the week. She knew exactly what she was doing.
It sounds crazy until you think, but you've only got to do it once. You might give up a day or 2 to get it all sorted, but then you're away.
So another idea that I actually got from a friend and I loved, and I've actually tried to do this a few times in the different places that we've moved, is having a friend who hates cooking as much as you do and coming together one day a week and doing a cook up. And so this particular friend, she would do 3 meals and her friend would do 3 meals and they would do a double batch. So at the end of it, they each had 6 meals for their family, an entire week's
done on
of
Monday.
Food. But the great thing about this suggestion was
you just need a big freezer.
You do need a big freezer if you've got a family house size. But the sense of community that she was able to create in that process and take something that is really mundane and challenging for a lot of parents and create an event out of it that she looked forward to. Monday was her favourite day of the week because she got to spend the day with her best friend.
Yeah. Hey, I've got a solution as well. When the kids are like, what's for dinner, Mum? Have the list on the fridge and just point at the fridge. So go over there and have a look because sometimes what about when they ask you and 30 seconds later they ask you again, like they ask you, they just want to know that there's food coming, but they didn't really listen. And then they're like, what's for dinner? And you're like, didn't I just tell you? So frustrating. Have you got any other strategies and solutions to help?
As the kids get older, assigning a child to either be your helper in the kitchen or actually assigning them to do a meal. So in our house, we did a bit of induction with them and taught them each how to do one of their favourite meals.
Yep.
And they just kept practicing that meal over the next few weeks and months until they got to a position where they were actually capable of doing that meal on their own.
I love it when the kids say, what's for dinner? And we can say, go ask Ella.
Yeah.
It's her night tonight. And everyone's like, oh, that means we're having wraps because that's the only thing that she can cook because we taught her. It's a great one.
And then another couple of ideas quickly is just, having a few go-to meals when life just gets so chaotic and you don't have anything, kind of mapped out, just knowing that you can go to 1, 2 or 3 meal and literally go, this is going to take me 5 or 10 minutes to kind of piece together. And sometimes it might actually mean putting a few things in the freezer. So in the past, I've done a big spaghetti bolognese batch up and I've actually just broken it up into smaller batches to freeze. So on those nights when I just don't feel like cooking, instead of having to go down to the local takeaway shop, I can just pull out one of those and add some fresh pasta.
And I guess there's also, for families that can afford it, there's those home delivery grocery, HelloFresh kind of things. I don't know what they're all called. And again, not sponsored. But I know heaps of people who say this just works so well for us because we get the grocery items, we get the recipe. It's always tasty. It's always something new, and that works for them. I got stopped by the HelloFresh people in the shopping centre one day because they're very active in their efforts to recruit new subscribers. And I said, no, not going to work. Our family's too big. And we sat down and did the maths because they really were convinced that this would work, and it was going to be some preposterous amount of money for our family. And they're like, yeah, we can understand why you probably want to do that on your own. Wasn't a great solution for us, but I know that it's a great solution for other people.
Well, hopefully this has been helpful for the time poor parent out there who just wants answers on how to make dinner just a little bit less stressful.
Yeah, we really hope you enjoy the podcast. In fact, we love getting your emails, podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. Soph in Devon in the UK.
I know that you've been doing this for a long time, but I just can't wrap my head around the fact that somebody in the UK is actually listening to us.
Not just listening, but Soph got in touch. She said, apologies for probably sending this to the wrong email, but I just wanted to say how I feel about the podcast at the Mo. I've binge listened to your podcast, listened to from the very first one right up to date. Wanted to say I'm loving Kylie being on board. What you're doing and the way it's presented has taken it from being great theory to actually real life, and it makes it fantastic to listen to how you put this great content into practice. Thank you, and don't change what you're doing. Well, Soph in Devon in the UK, we're stoked to hear from you, and we're glad that you're enjoying the podcast. If you do enjoy the podcast, don't just let us know about it. Let everyone know by going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a rating and a review. When you do that, other people find out about the podcast. The Apple algorithm preferences it so other people find it when they're looking for stuff about families, and we can help to make their families happier. If you'd like more info, by the way, about how we can help your family flourish, just visit happyfamilies.com.au. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media, and our executive producer is Craig Bruce. If you'd like more info about how we can help your family be happier, you can find everything you need to know at happyfamilies.com.au.